All right, welcome to 6th grade science. Your lesson for today is going to be just a little bit different. The content for the lesson, what you're going to learn about the different structures of the flower, you're going to learn on your own through this format that's called a flipped classroom format. So as we go through this lesson, you're going to complete a diagram outlining the structure and function of the different reproductive parts of the flower, and then that diagram is going to be your entrance ticket for when you come into science, and that will allow you to do the hands-on flower dissection, where you get to take a look at a flower up close on your own. All right, let's go ahead and get started with our lesson. You'll need at least 3 different colors and the diagram handout that I gave you. The big idea for this lesson is that all living organisms have identifiable structural characteristics that allow for reproduction. That means that all structures are designed to be able to reproduce. This fits into our unit that we're talking about with animal and plant adaptations. We've been mostly talking about adaptations for survival, and now we're going to talk about plant adaptations for reproduction. Therefore, the essential question for this lesson is, what structural characteristics does a flower have for reproduction? So we're going to be looking at all these different structures that you see in these different flowers right now. All right, so if you want to have your diagram out, you can pick one of your 3 colors, and we are going to first start with the male reproductive structures, and you can see there's just actually 3 labels that we're going to be completing for the male section. The color that you chose for the male reproductive structures, you can color in the box here to create your key. And the first one that we're going to talk about is the male reproductive structure as a whole. That's this long part right here and this little part at the top. And that's called a stamen. And how can you remember that a stamen is a male reproductive structure? Yep, you got it. It has the word men in it. So go ahead and label that on your diagram. And feel free, what's great about this lesson is that if I'm going too fast for you, at any time you can pause to complete writing the notes, or you can revisit it again if you missed something. Okay, so take full advantage of that. The next structure that we're going to talk about is this part that's at the tip. Okay, and this is called the anther. And the anther is important in the male reproductive system because that's where the sperm cells are produced. And the sperm cells are stored in the pollen. Maybe if you've had flowers in a bouquet after a little while and the pollen starts to fall down on the table, or you've touched a flower and you've had pollen on your fingers, that's where it's coming from, is the anther right here. The third and final structure that I'm going to talk about for the male reproductive part is this long stalk right here. And this is called the filament. And it basically supports the anther and holds the anther up so that that pollen is available for either wind or pollinators or water or something else to be able to move that pollen. All right? So that's male reproductive structures. Now go ahead and grab a different color of your choice. Oh, first let's test your knowledge. Okay, go ahead and take a shot at it. Can you identify what B is? Can you identify what A is? And C. Go ahead and take a moment. Here we go. So this top part here is the anther. This whole structure together is called the stamen, and the stalk that holds it up is called the filament. How'd you do? All right, now we're going to move into the female reproductive structure, so go ahead and grab a different color and fill in your key. This should be down here on your diagram. And again, we're going to label the structure and the function of each part. So here we go. First, again, we're going to start with the whole female structure together, and it actually goes from the base of this rounded part all all the way down here, all the way up to the tip. Okay, and this is called the pistil. And it's the whole female reproductive structure together. Like we have our body, but then within our body we have arms and fingers and shoulders. Okay, this is the pistil, but within the pistil there's going to be different parts that make it up. The very, very top of the pistil is called the stigma, and it's sticky. Okay, and it's sticky so that it can collect that pollen. The pollen can either be collected from its own flower, or it can be collected from a different flower via a pollinator, or again, wind or water. The next part that I'm going to talk about is the style, and the style is a tubular structure, okay, and it connects the stigma at the very top to the ovary down here, which is going to be our next one. The ovary down here at the base protects the ovules, and eventually that's what's going to become the fruit. So this round part right here is the ovary, and if you look very carefully inside the ovary, you'll see the ovules, and the ovules contain the egg cells, and if those are fertilized, then those will become the seeds of the flower, and that's where the seeds will form. Once the seeds will form, then the ovary will turn into a fruit to protect the seeds in the middle. And that is those are your female reproductive structures. Let's go ahead and see how you're doing so far. Here's a picture of the ovary and the ovules inside. And you can see how if the ovules are fertilized, okay, if those egg cells are fertilized, they'll turn into seeds, and then will be protected by the ovary, which becomes the fruit. All right, let's see how you're doing. I'm going to kind of mix in the female and the male reproductive parts. So in your mind, just kind of draw a line from the words to the different structures and see if you can label the different structures in this flower. All right, here we go. Let's give it a shot. So this part, again, all together, the whole top part, you can't really see the ovary down there, makes up the pistil. Okay, the stigma, again, is the sticky top. The style connects the stigma down to the ovary. Now we're reviewing back into the male reproductive parts, and the anthers where the pollen is produced, and the filament is the stalk that holds it up. How'd you do? All right. So we just have a couple more structures now, and these are not classified as male or female, but they are very important to the reproduction of the flower, so we're going to talk about them. Go ahead and pick your third color and color in your key down below. It can be a color of your choice. And the first structure that we're going to talk about is this sepal right here. Those are tiny leaves to protect the flower bud. If you've noticed a rose before it blooms, it has like those little green leaves around it, and then those open up and then the flower comes out. Okay, so those are called the sepal. And then obviously the petal is very important to pollination and fertilization, because the petal is what attracts the pollinators. It provides a landing pad, and it's colorful. And if you notice, sometimes there's lines of color that direct the insects right down to the nectar in the middle of the flower, okay, which is where they'll then get the pollen and be able to transfer it. Here's an example of the sepals. Okay, you can see how they protect the bud, and then the flower and the colorful petals to attract the pollinators. All right, so one final thing is I just want to make sure that you understand the difference between pollination and fertilization. I have a feeling that you've studied pollination in the past, or that you might be familiar with it. We can review it together in class. But pollination, quite simply put, is really just the transfer of the pollen to the pistil. Okay, so pollination is just getting the pollen to the sticky part of the pistil of the stigma. It can be done through insects, wind, water. Flowers can be self-pollinated or they can be cross-pollinated. So the pollen can transfer from one flower to another or within a flower itself. Okay. Fertilization, on the other hand, and you're going to write the difference between these two on the back of your diagram so you can turn your diagram over. Fertilization, on the other hand, takes it one step further because once that pollen grain lands on the sticky stigma at the top, it actually creates a pollen tube. I think this is so fascinating. And it creates a tube that goes all the way down the style and it goes into the ovary and into the ovules. And that allows the sperm cells that are in the pollen to connect with the egg cells that are in the ovules. And so now the ovules are fertilized. So what's going to happen next? You got it. Okay. The fertilized ovules are going to become seeds. Okay. Eventually, the flower is going to, the petals are going to wither away. Okay. And the ovary is going to begin to swell and the petals drop and you're going to have your seeds that are protected by your ovary, which is a fruit that grows bigger. Then, if that fruit kind of decomposes or is eaten by an animal or something happens, and those seeds land on soil in just the right conditions, that means the right amount of water, the right amount of soil, the right conditions, then those seeds will germinate and they'll start to form new flowers. All right? So that is our lesson in a nutshell of the male and female reproductive structures of a flower and how flowers reproduce and some of the different characteristics that they have. Your diagram with this explanation on the back, the difference between pollination and fertilization, again will be your entrance ticket to the lab. I encourage you to grab a flower from your garden, any flower that you're interested to bring in, and we will dissect it together and we'll have a chance to use those new microscopes that we got, which I'm very excited to use. In conclusion, one final thing is as you look at these different flowers that are kind of blooming, I want to revisit our big idea that all living organisms have identifiable structural characteristics that allow for reproduction. And then going back to our essential question for this lesson, what structural characteristics does a flower have for reproduction? And see how you can do. Can you identify these different parts and look at how they're different? Okay, sometimes the pistils have different parts at the top. Can you identify the stigmas? Can you identify the anthers, the stamen versus the pistils? Okay, it's harder, a little bit harder. That's a good one right there. So kind of take a moment to look at these different flowers and just kind of quiz yourself and see if you can identify any of the parts. Thank you very much for watching this lesson. I look forward to looking at your diagrams in class and using your knowledge hands-on as we really get to take a look at real flowers. All right, have a good rest of the day.